Fly this jet and I'll marry you. The billionaire's voice dripped poison. She was mocking him. The janitor holding a mop in front of her billion-dollar Gulfstream. 300 people had told her no. Every professional pilot in New York had refused to touch that aircraft with a Category 2 hurricane rolling in. But her grandmother was dying 3,000 miles away in Paris. Midnight deadline. $2.3 billion evaporating in 9 hours if she didn't make it. So when the man in the grey uniform stepped forward and said, "I can fly it," she laughed. Her assistant laughed. They had no idea they'd just insulted one of the finest fighter pilots the Navy ever trained. What happened in the next 7 hours would change everything she thought she knew about power. If this story resonated with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Rain hammered the glass like bullets. Victoria Sterling stood in the empty hangar, staring at $40 million of useless metal. The Gulfstream G650 sat on the tarmac, fueled and ready, but without a pilot, it might as well have been a paperweight. 9 hours. That's all she had left. Her phone buzzed. The text from her grandmother's lawyer was ice cold. Midnight Paris time, or the $2.3 billion goes to charity. No exceptions. Imagine your entire life, your name, your power, your identity, evaporating in 9 hours. Everything you thought was yours, gone. That's what Victoria was staring down. 27 years old, platinum blonde, diamond earrings catching harsh fluorescent light. She looked like money incarnate. Sterling Kucher. The empire her grandmother Adelaide built from nothing. The name that opened every door. And in 9 hours, none of it would be hers. Her assistant Sophie was on her 15th call, voice climbing toward panic. "Miss Sterling, Charter Elite won't fly. Executive Air is grounded. Alliance jets said..." I don't care what they said. Victoria's voice could cut steel. Find someone. But there was no one. Her personal pilot, hospital bed, food poisoning, the backup, Vancouver, the retired colonel she'd used twice, license suspended, the charter owner who owed her favors, laughed at her. Actually laughed. Outside, the storm system rolled across the sky like a living wall. Category 2. Every airport within 300 miles was about to shut down, and her grandmother, cold, impossible Adelaide, was dying in a Paris hospital with one final test. One final trap. Prove you can handle real pressure without the Sterling name doing all the work. The lawyer's words from 8 hours ago still burned in Victoria's memory. If you don't arrive before midnight to sign the documents, everything transfers to charity. She wants to know if you're strong enough to earn what you were born into. Victoria touched the necklace at her throat. Her mother's necklace. The only thing left from the woman who died when Victoria was 16, leaving her to be raised by Adelaide's ice-cold perfection. Here's the thing about inherited wealth. You never know if people respect you, or just your last name. Victoria was about to find out which one she actually was, without the money. Sophie's voice cracked. "Miss Sterling, we're out of options. The storm window closes in 30 minutes. Maybe if we call the lawyers and explain..." "Don't." Victoria's hand shot up. "Don't you dare say we quit." The hangar fell silent except for wind screaming through cracks in the walls and thunder rolling like a countdown. Then a voice. Quiet. Steady. "Impossible. I can fly it." Victoria's breath stopped. She turned slowly, heels clicking on concrete. A man in a grey janitor's uniform stood near the maintenance door, mop in hand, still dripping, cleaning supplies hanging from his belt, dark hair damp with work, eyes that didn't blink, didn't waver, didn't show a single flicker of doubt. She'd seen him 100 times, always background, always invisible, nobody. Sophie stared at him for 3 full seconds, then burst out laughing. Sophie's laughter wasn't polite. It was cruel, the kind designed to humiliate. "Oh my God, are you kidding me right now?" Her voice pitched higher. "Miss Sterling, he's the janitor. He mops floors. He cleans the bathrooms. Victoria held up one finger. The laughter died like someone cut its throat. Because Victoria wasn't laughing, she was doing math. 9 hours minus the 30-minute window, minus the 7-hour flight, minus ground transport, equals 13 minutes of margin for error. 13 minutes between keeping everything and losing everything. And this man, this nobody with a name tag that read Marcus Chen, Janitorial Services, was the only person in this entire building who'd said yes. Victoria stepped closer. Her heels echoed, each click a judgment. You. Her voice was winter. You think you can fly that? She gestured at the Gulf Stream visible through the windows. Top speed, Mach 0.925. Range 7,000 nautical miles. The kind of machine that required thousands of hours of training and certifications thicker than phone books. Marcus nodded once. Yes, ma'am. Through that? Victoria pointed at the storm. Lightning split the sky like cracks in black glass. Yes, ma'am. Sophie made a choking sound. Real talk. Have you ever been so desperate you'd trust a complete stranger with your life? Because most people say no until they're standing where Victoria was standing. Comment your honest answer. Victoria's smile was razor sharp, the kind that had destroyed careers. All right, janitor boy, here's the deal. She folded her arms. Fly me to Paris, through that storm. Get me there before midnight. Pause, let it land, and I'll marry you. The words hit the hangar like a physical blow. Sophie actually gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Marcus's expression didn't change. Not even a flicker. Just those tired, steady eyes holding Victoria's gaze with something that looked almost like sadness. Like he'd been mocked before, and this was just one more time. How's that for a lottery ticket? Victoria's voice dripped poison. A nobody like you landing a sterling? Sophie was shaking her head, half laughing, half panicking. This is insane. He can't possibly... But Marcus set down his mop. The handle clattered against concrete like a gunshot. He wiped his hands on his uniform, slowly, deliberately, like he had all the time in the world while Victoria's entire future bled away second by second. Then he looked up. The keys. 2 words. That's all. Not asking, not begging, just stating a fact. And something in the way he said it made Victoria's skin prickle. Like he'd done this before. Like the uniform was a costume, and underneath was someone else entirely. Sophie grabbed Victoria's arm, voice urgent. You are not getting in that plane with... But Victoria was already reaching into her bag. Her fingers found the key fob. Cold, heavy. $40 million of responsibility. She held it up between them. You sure? Marcus stepped forward and took it from her hand. His fingers were rough, calloused, working hands that didn't shake, not even slightly. He turned and walked toward the jet like he owned it. Victoria stood frozen. Sophie's voice was rising. Miss Sterling, please, this is insane. He's a janitor. He could be lying. He could kill you. He... Victoria checked her phone. 9:26. The storm window was closing. Her grandmother was dying. $2.3 billion was evaporating. She looked at Marcus, already at the jet stairs, waiting. Then at Sophie's terrified face. Her heels clicked across the concrete. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. Sophie called after her, voice breaking. Miss Sterling, please. Victoria didn't look back. She climbed the stairs. The cabin door sealed behind her with a heavy, final thunk. And in that moment, sitting in the passenger seat, watching Marcus Chen slide into the pilot's chair and place his hands on controls like they were extensions of his own body, Victoria Sterling realized something terrifying. She'd just bet her entire life on a man whose last name she'd learned 30 seconds ago. Outside, Sophie stood on the tarmac, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling security. Inside, Marcus's fingers moved across the instrument panel, checking, verifying, testing. Every movement precise, every touch deliberate, like muscle memory from another life. Victoria's mouth went dry. Who are you? She whispered. Marcus didn't look at her, just pressed the ignition. The engines roared to life. The engines didn't just start, they screamed. A sound Victoria had heard 1,000 times, but never like this. Never sitting in a passenger seat, while a janitor's hands moved across controls like he was born doing it. Marcus's voice came through her headset. Calm, Professional. Completely transformed. Tower, this is Sterling 1 requesting immediate clearance. Runway 27. Victoria's breath caught. He sounded like a different person. The quiet janitor was gone. This voice had authority, command. The tower crackled back. Sterling 1, we're showing severe weather. Wind shear at 35 knots. Visibility under a quarter mile. We strongly advise... Copy that, tower. Marcus's interruption was polite, but absolute. We have a 22-minute window before airport closure. Requesting priority clearance. Silence on the radio. 3 seconds that felt like 3 years. Then, cleared for takeoff, Sterling 1. Godspeed. Marcus's hands moved. Throttle forward. Brake release. The jet rolled. Victoria gripped the armrest so hard her knuckles went white. She'd flown hundreds of times. Private jets were as normal to her as taxis. But this wasn't normal. This was a stranger in a janitor's uniform flying her into a storm that had grounded every professional pilot in New York. Let's be honest. At what point would you have said no? When he took the keys? When you saw the storm? Or are you already on that plane in your head? Drop a comment. The jet accelerated down the runway. Rain hammered the windscreen like machine gun fire. Wind tried to shove them sideways. Marcus made a micro-adjustment, subtle, precise. The jet straightened. They hit rotation speed and the nose lifted. Wheels left the ground, and then they were climbing into hell. The storm swallowed them whole. Darkness, rain, wind that shook the aircraft like a predator with prey. Lightning flashed so close, Victoria could see the purple afterimage through her closed eyelids. The jet bucked violently. Her stomach dropped into her feet. A strangled sound escaped her throat, but Marcus's hands never wavered. He studied the weather radar, the altimeter, the artificial horizon. His eyes moved in a pattern. Scan, process, adjust. Over and over. Mechanical. Perfect. Like he'd done this 10,000 times before. We're fine. His voice through the headset was steady as stone. Just finding our altitude. Just finding our altitude. Like they weren't being torn apart by 60-mile-per-hour winds at 3,000 feet. The turbulence worsened. The jet shook so hard Victoria's teeth chattered. Marcus touched 3 controls in quick succession, adjusted course 15 degrees north, increased altitude to 41,000 feet, and suddenly, like passing through a curtain, the shaking stopped. Smooth air, glass smooth. Victoria opened her eyes. They were above the storm. Moonlight painted the clouds below them silver. Beautiful. Deadly. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him. His face was illuminated by the glow of the instrument panel. Completely calm, focused but not tense. This wasn't luck. This wasn't adrenaline. This was mastery. Where did a janitor learn to fly like this? The question burned in her throat. But before she could ask, a warning light flickered on the dashboard. Orange, insistent, hydraulic pressure. Victoria's eyes went wide. What's that? Marcus's jaw tightened, just slightly. The first crack in his composure. Minor hydraulic fluctuation. His voice stayed level. Normal in storm conditions, but the light didn't go off. It stayed on, glowing, accusing. Victoria's heart hammered. That's not normal, is it? Marcus didn't answer. He was scanning diagnostics, reading data streams, calculating something in his head. His fingers moved across backup systems. The jet banked slightly left. Altitude decreased by 2,000 feet. Cabin pressure adjusted. The warning light flickered. Once. Twice. Then went dark. Marcus exhaled slowly. So quietly Victoria almost didn't hear it. We're good. He adjusted their heading. Just precautionary. Victoria stared at him. Her pulse was still racing, her hands still shaking. But his hands, steady as steel. She realized something that made her skin crawl and her heart skip at the same time. He'd just saved them from something she didn't even know was dangerous. The question came out as a whisper. Where did you learn to fly like this? Marcus didn't look at her, just kept his eyes on the instruments, the horizon, the dark Atlantic stretched out below them. Long pause. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. I wasn't always a janitor. That's not an answer. Marcus's expression shifted. Something painful flickered across his face and disappeared. It's the only one you're getting. Silence filled the cockpit, except for the steady hum of engines and the whisper of air over wings. They were 7 hours from Paris, 7 hours locked in this small space, with a man whose last name she'd learned 10 minutes ago, a man who flew like a ghost and spoke like he was carrying the weight of 1,000 secrets. Victoria looked out the window at the moonlit clouds. Her entire life was in the hands of a stranger, and she had no idea if that was the bravest or stupidest thing she'd ever done. The flight computer display showed Paris, 6 HRS 52 Mineras. Outside, the storm raged below them. Inside, a different kind of storm was just beginning. 5.5 hours later, dawn broke over France. Victoria hadn't slept, couldn't. She'd spent the entire flight watching Marcus, the way his eyes never stopped moving, instruments, horizon, weather radar, a constant cycle of vigilance that never broke, not even once. The way he breathed, controlled even, like meditation. The way his hands rested on the controls with a gentleness that didn't match his calloused fingers. This wasn't a man pretending to know what he was doing. This was a man who'd done this so many times it had become part of his DNA. Marcus's voice cut through her thoughts, beginning descent into Charles de Gaulle. Victoria checked her watch. 11:34 Paris time, 26 minutes until midnight. Her chest tightened. They might actually make it. But then Marcus's expression changed. Subtle. A slight narrowing of his eyes as he studied something on the instruments. The tower's voice crackled through. Sterling 1 visibility is below minimums. Heavy fog. We recommend holding pattern until conditions improve. No. The word exploded from Victoria's mouth before she could stop it. No. We don't have time for... Marcus held up one hand. Calm. Silencing. Tower. Requesting ILS approach. Runway 26 right. Sterling 1. Conditions are marginal at best. I can make it. 3 words, spoken with such quiet certainty that even the air traffic controller paused. Then, cleared for ILS approach. Good luck, Sterling 1. Marcus locked onto the instrument landing system, his eyes fixed on the displays, flying completely blind now. No visual reference, just numbers and lines and faith in technology. Victoria pressed her face to the window. Couldn't see anything, just grey, thick soup grey that swallowed the world, altitude dropping, 5,000 feet, 3,000, 1,500. Still nothing visible outside. Marcus's hands made micro-adjustments, left, right. Throttle back slightly. I can't see anything. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. Can you see? Trust the instruments. 500 feet. 300. Still just fog. Dense. Impenetrable. Victoria's fingernails dug into the armrests. And then, like a miracle, a break in the grey. Runway lights appeared. Faint. Ghostly. But there. Marcus flared perfectly. The kind of landing where you can't feel the moment the wheels touch down. Smooth as silk. The jet rolled to a stop. Marcus powered down the engines. And suddenly, the cabin was silent, except for Victoria's ragged breathing. She sat there gripping the armrests, staring straight ahead. Her whole body was shaking, but not from cold, from shock, from adrenaline, from the realization that she'd just crossed the Atlantic with a man who handled a $40 million aircraft like it was a bicycle. Marcus unbuckled, removed his headset, ran a hand through his hair. First sign of fatigue she'd seen in 7 hours. Victoria finally found her voice. I don't understand. Marcus looked at her, his eyes tired, guarded, sad in a way that had nothing to do with being sleepy. What don't you understand? Any of this. You. How you... Who you... The words wouldn't form. Her brain couldn't process what she'd just witnessed. Marcus opened the cabin door. Cold Paris air rushed in. Airport crew was already running toward them. You need to go. Your grandmother is waiting. Victoria stood. Her legs wobbled. She grabbed the seat back for support, started toward the door, then turned back. Wait, I need to know, you need to go. His voice was gentle but absolute, final. Victoria stepped onto the stairs, looked back one more time. You said you weren't always a janitor. What were you? Marcus looked past her, out at the Paris dawn, his voice barely audible over the wind. Someone who used to believe he could save people. Pause, heavy, weighted with something Victoria couldn't name. Someone who failed. Most people don't get second chances after they fail, but what if the failure wasn't even yours? Comment below, do you believe in redemption? Victoria stood there, wind whipping her hair, wanting to ask more, needing to understand. But a limousine was waiting, headlights cutting through the fog. The driver called out, "Miss Sterling, the hospital, we must hurry." She forced herself to move, down the stairs, across the tarmac, climbed into the back seat still holding her bag. The door closed. She looked back at the jet. Marcus was visible through the cockpit window, head in his hands, shoulders curved inward, like the weight he'd been holding up for 7 hours had finally crashed down on him. The limo pulled away. Victoria reached into her bag for her phone. Her fingers brushed something that shouldn't be there. She pulled it out. Marcus's employee badge. Must have fallen out of his pocket during the flight. She turned it over. Handwritten on the back in blue pen, Myers MIT Fund, $247 saved. Victoria's throat closed. Meyer, MIT, $247. She stared at those words, at the careful handwriting, at the heartbreaking math of a man working night shifts as a janitor, trying to save for something that cost $75,000 a year. The limo raced through empty Paris streets. But Victoria couldn't stop looking at that badge, couldn't stop seeing Marcus's face when he said he'd failed, couldn't stop hearing the absolute certainty in his voice when he told the tower, "I can make it." "Who are you, Marcus Chen?" She whispered it to the badge like it might answer. Outside, Paris blurred past. Inside, everything Victoria thought she understood about people was beginning to crack. The limousine tore through empty Paris streets like time itself was chasing them. Victoria clutched Marcus's badge in one hand, her phone in the other. 11:47, 13 minutes. The hospital appeared through the fog. Hôpital Américain de Paris, Whitestone. Too clean. Too quiet for a place where people came to die. She didn't wait for the driver. Shoved the door open and ran. Louboutin heels on marble floors. Click, click, click. The sound of desperation echoing through sterile hallways. A nurse tried to stop her. Visiting hours. Second floor, room 217. Victoria didn't slow down. "I know where I'm going." She found the room, pushed through the door. Adelaide Sterling lay in the hospital bed, looking impossibly small, 82 years old. The woman who'd built an empire, who'd commanded boardrooms, who'd never shown weakness in her entire life, reduced to this. Oxygen tubes, monitors beeping, skin like paper. But her eyes, sharp, clear, still judging. A lawyer stood beside the bed, expensive suit, leather briefcase already open, documents spread across the rolling table. "Miss Sterling," his voice was clinical. "We have 4 minutes." Victoria moved to the bed. Her grandmother's hand found hers, the grip surprisingly strong, cutting it close. Adelaide's voice was barely a whisper, but the steel was still there. "I'm here, grandmother, I'm here." The lawyer pushed papers forward. "Sign here, and here, initial here." Victoria's hand shook as she scribbled her name. Once, twice, 3 times. The lawyer checked his watch. 11:58. It's official. He gathered the documents. The inheritance is secured. But Victoria didn't feel relief, just emptiness. Adelaide's fingers tightened around hers. "How did you get here, child?" Victoria swallowed hard. "I found a pilot. Did you buy your way here?" Adelaide's eyes searched her face. Like always? Victoria thought of Marcus, the mop in his hand, the mockery, the marriage joke she'd thrown at him like a weapon. "No, grandmother. Someone helped me. Someone real." Adelaide's expression softened. First time Victoria had seen her grandmother smile in years, maybe decades. Good. Her voice fading. Maybe there's hope for you yet. Victoria leaned closer. Grandmother, Adelaide's other hand lifted, trembling, weak, pressed something into Victoria's palm. An envelope, sealed. Open this when I'm gone. Adelaide's breathing labored. Not before. Grandmother, don't... Shh. Adelaide's eyes were closing. I'm tired, dear, so very tired. Tell me about him, the pilot. So Victoria did. Described the storm, the calm in Marcus's voice, the way he flew like breathing, the sadness in his eyes when he said he'd failed at saving people. Adelaide listened, smiled. Sounds like someone worth knowing. Her breathing slowed. The monitors changed their rhythm. Victoria held her hand tighter. Grandmother, please. Adelaide's last words came out barely audible. Don't waste your inheritance, Victoria. I don't mean the money. The monitor flatlined at 12:17 a.m. The nurse came in. Quiet, professional. I'm so sorry. Victoria sat there holding her grandmother's cooling hand while strangers disconnected tubes and turned off machines and covered the woman who'd raised her with a white sheet. She didn't cry. Couldn't. The tears were locked somewhere deep where she'd buried them when her mother died 11 years ago. 2 a.m. Victoria sat alone in the hospital waiting room. Everyone else gone. She opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Adelaide's handwriting, shaky but clear. My dearest Victoria, money is the easy answer to every question you'll face. The hard answer is becoming someone worth the name you carry. Your grandfather was a mechanic when I met him. My parents were horrified, but he made me real. He made me human. Find someone who makes you real. Find someone who sees you, not sterling couture. I wonder if you'll ever figure this out. I hope I gave you enough time. All my love. Adelaide. Victoria read it 3 times. Then the tears came. Not polite tears. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook her whole body, crying for her grandmother, for her mother, for the girl she'd been before money became her only language. For the emptiness she'd been carrying so long, she'd forgotten what fullness felt like. She pulled out Marcus's badge, stared at it through blurred vision. Maya's MIT fund, 240 saddles saved. $247 towards 75,000. Years of work, night shifts, mopping floors. And he'd still said yes when she needed him. Hadn't asked for anything. Just flew, while she'd mocked him, called him nobody, offered marriage like an insult. Victoria pressed the badge to her chest and cried harder. When she finally stopped, dawn was breaking over Paris. She pulled out her phone, Googled Marcus Chen pilot. Nothing. Marcus Chen Navy. Nothing specific. She stared at the badge, at the careful handwriting. He didn't want to be found, but she was going to find him anyway, not because she owed him, though she did, not because she was grateful, though she was, but because her grandmother's last words were still echoing in her head. Find someone who makes you real. And for 7 hours in that cockpit, watching a janitor fly like an angel, Victoria had felt more real than she had in her entire manufactured life. Have you ever met someone for a few hours who changed everything you thought you knew about yourself? 3 days after the funeral, Victoria sat in her penthouse office staring at a computer screen she couldn't focus on. The board wanted to meet about Q4 projections. Her assistant had forwarded 87 emails marked urgent. Sterling Couture needed decisions on the spring line. None of it mattered. She pulled Marcus's badge from her desk drawer, turned it over, read the same handwritten words for the 100th time. Maya's MIT fund, 240 cents saved. Victoria picked up her phone, called her head of security. I need you to find someone. Discreetly. She gave him Marcus's name, the employee ID number from the badge. What am I looking for, Miss Sterling? Everything. Who he is. Who he was. Why a man who can fly like that is mopping floors. 48 hours later, the security chief returned with a file so thin it was almost insulting. Not much here. He dropped it on her desk. Guy's a ghost. Victoria opened it. 3 pages, that's all. Marcus Chen, age 34. Hired 8 months ago as night janitor at Sterling Industries. No previous employment listed, no social media presence, no digital footprint. Emergency contact. Maya Chen, sister, age 16. Address: small apartment in Queens. It's like he didn't exist before 8 months ago. Victoria stared at the pages. A man doesn't just appear out of nowhere, especially not a man who flies like that. She thought about the way his hands moved on the controls, military precision, military bearing. She made another call. An old friend from Yale whose father was a retired Navy admiral. "I need a favor. Can you check military records?" Her friend hesitated. "Victoria, that's not exactly—" "Please, it's important." 2 hours later, her phone rang. The friend's voice was different, subdued, almost reverent. "Victoria, who is this guy to you? Just tell me what you found. Sit down first." Victoria's pulse quickened. "I'm sitting. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, United States Navy, fighter pilot, FA-18 Super Hornet, Top Gun program graduate, top 2% of his class." Victoria's breath stopped. "Call sign, steady, 2 combat deployments, 17 confirmed carrier landings in adverse conditions, Navy Cross nominee. That's the second highest military decoration, Victoria. This guy's a legitimate hero." The room tilted slightly. "There's more. Training accident 4 years ago. Co-pilot killed in action. Lieutenant Cameron Hayes. Marcus survived. Received honorable discharge shortly after." "What was the reason for discharge?" "Psychological unfitness for combat flight operations." Victoria closed her eyes. Someone who used to believe he could save people. Someone who failed. Now it made sense. Horrible, tragic sense. Her friend continued. "There's also this. His parents died 2 years ago. House fire. He's sole guardian of his younger sister, Maya. Yeah, smart kid apparently. Math prodigy. Got early acceptance to MIT, but they can't afford it." "How did you know?" Victoria looked at the badge. "Because he's trying to save $247 at a time." She hung up, sat in silence. A decorated war hero. A man who'd flown combat missions, who'd landed jets on aircraft carriers in the middle of the ocean, and she'd mocked him, called him nobody, offered marriage like it was a joke. The weight of it crushed her chest. Victoria pulled up the Sterling Industries security footage, found the hangar, went back to last night's recording. 11 p.m. Marcus arrived, grey uniform, bucket and mop. She watched him work, methodical, quiet, invisible by choice. Then a teenage girl appeared, Asian features, ponytail, backpack covered in math equations. Maya. Marcus's whole face changed when he saw her, lit up. The sadness disappeared for just a moment. They sat in the break room. He shared his sandwich with her. She showed him homework. He helped with trigonometry, pointing at problems, explaining something that made her laugh, their easy affection, their closeness. Victoria's throat tightened. Maya fell asleep on the couch, textbook open on her chest. Marcus gently closed the book, covered her with his jacket, sat beside her with his hand on her shoulder. He whispered something Victoria had to turn up the volume to hear. "I've got you, Maya, always." His face when he said it, exhausted, worn, but full of love so fierce it hurt to watch. Victoria closed the laptop, sat in her empty office, in her empty penthouse, in her empty life. This man had lost everything, his career, his best friend, his parents, and he was still fighting, still showing up, still trying to give his sister a future he couldn't afford. While Victoria had everything and felt nothing. She looked at her grandmother's letter, framed on her desk now. "Find someone who makes you real." Marcus Chen wasn't just real. He was the most real person she'd ever met. And she'd treated him like dirt. Victoria made a decision. She pulled up his employee file, found his shift schedule. Night janitor, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. She would go to the hangar tonight. She would talk to him. She would... What? Apologize? Explain? Offer money he'd obviously refuse? She didn't know. But she couldn't keep sitting in this office pretending spreadsheets mattered when a man who'd saved her life was 3 floors below her mopping floors to save $247 for his sister's dreams. Victoria stood, grabbed her coat. For the first time in 3 days, she knew exactly where she needed to be. If you found out someone carried that much pain quietly, would you leave them alone out of respect? Or would you need to say something, even knowing it might make things worse? Victoria waited in the hangar until 11 p.m. She'd dressed down for the first time in years. Jeans, simple sweater, hair in a ponytail, no makeup, no diamonds, just her and an envelope with a check inside. $75,000, MIT deposit. Due in 2 weeks or Maya loses her spot. Victoria had done the math. At Marcus's salary, it would take him 6 years to save that much. 6 years of night shifts and exhaustion and watching his brilliant sister's dreams slip further away. But she could fix it. One signature, problem solved. The service entrance opened. Marcus walked in wearing his grey uniform. Stopped when he saw her. Miss Sterling. He never called her by her first name. Always formal, always distant. Victoria stood, walked toward him. I know about Maya, about MIT. Marcus's jaw tightened. You investigated me. I needed to understand who you were. Now you know. He moved past her toward his equipment closet. I'm exactly what you thought, a nobody. That's not true and you know it. Marcus pulled out his mop and bucket, started filling it with water like she wasn't there. Victoria's voice rose. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, Top Gun graduate, call sign steady, Navy Cross nominee. You're a decorated war hero. The water kept running. Marcus didn't turn around. I know what happened to Cameron Hayes. I know about your parents. I know you're raising Maya alone. The water stopped. Marcus's shoulders were rigid, his back still to her. Victoria pulled out the envelope, held it toward him, even though he couldn't see it. This is for Maya. MIT deposit, $75,000. Silence. Then Marcus turned, looked at the envelope, his face unreadable. He walked over slowly, took it from her hand, opened it, saw the check, and without hesitation, tore it in half. Victoria gasped. What are you? He tore it again, and again, let the pieces fall to the concrete floor like snow. I don't need your charity. Victoria's voice shook. This isn't charity. This is what? Marcus stepped closer. Guilt? Pity? You feeling bad about the poor people? I'm trying to help. I don't want your money. His voice was quiet but absolute. I want to earn it. I want Maya to know we did this ourselves. Your pride is going to cost her MIT. Then that's on me. Marcus turned away. Not you. Victoria felt something break inside her chest. Why won't you just... Because I spent 4 years being told I wasn't good enough. Marcus spun back, voice cracking. That I failed. That I couldn't save the person who mattered most. He took a breath, steadied himself. I walked away from everything because I didn't trust myself anymore. The only thing I have left is this. Taking care of Maya my way, earning it, proving I can do one thing right. His eyes met hers. Raw, vulnerable. If I take your money, what does that make me? Just another person you rescued because you felt guilty? Victoria's vision blurred. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. No. Marcus's voice softened. You didn't. He started walking toward the exit. Victoria found her voice again. Wait. He stopped. Didn't turn. You're right. Her words tumbled out. I felt guilty. I mocked you. I treated you like you were nothing. And then I found out who you really were, and I didn't know how to make it right. Pause. But this isn't about my guilt. Victoria's voice broke. I watched you with Maya. I saw how much you love her, and I wanted to help because maybe helping you would make me feel like less of a terrible person. Tears streamed down her face. But that's still making it about me, isn't it? Marcus turned, looked at her, really looked, saw her tears, her genuine remorse. His expression softened slightly. Why do you care, Miss Sterling? Because you made me feel something I haven't felt in years. What's that? Small. Victoria wiped her eyes. In a good way. Like maybe the world doesn't revolve around me and my problems. The break room door opened. Maya came out, sleepy, rubbing her eyes. Marcus, I'm ready to... She saw Victoria. Stopped. Oh. Hi. Victoria wiped tears quickly. Hi, Maya. Maya looked between them, confused. Are you okay? Victoria surprised herself by laughing through tears. Yeah, sweetie. I'm okay. Marcus moved to his sister. Time to go home, Maya. Maya walked to Victoria, touched her arm gently. I don't know what's wrong, but I hope you feel better. Such simple kindness from a teenager who had every reason to be bitter about her circumstances. It broke Victoria completely. Thank you, she whispered. Marcus and Maya walked toward the exit. Victoria called out, Marcus! He paused. If not money. What can I do? Marcus considered. Then his voice came back quiet but firm. Figure out who you want to be, not who your name tells you to be. They left. Victoria stood alone in the empty hangar, torn check pieces scattered at her feet like the remains of everything she thought she understood about helping people. She bent down, picked up one piece, stared at her own signature. For the first time in her life, money hadn't been the answer, and she had absolutely no idea what to do next. When someone refuses your help because accepting it would cost them their dignity, are they being stubborn? Or are they teaching you something about what really matters? 1 week later, Victoria called an emergency board meeting. 12 board members filed into the conference room. All men over 50. All skeptical. All wondering why the newly minted CEO had summoned them at 8 a.m. on a Monday. Roger Wells, the chairman, took his seat at the head of the table. His seat. The one he'd occupied for 20 years before Adelaide died. Victoria, what's this about? We have quarterly reports to review. Victoria stood, pulled up a presentation on the screen behind her. I'm launching a new division, Sterling Aviation Academy. Confused silence. Roger's eyebrows rose. Aviation? We're a fashion and luxury brand. Why would we? Because I'm making it happen. She clicked the remote. The screen filled with details, budgets, partnerships, timelines, full-ride scholarships for underprivileged students with STEM aptitude, flight training, engineering programs, aerospace education, partnerships with MIT, Caltech, Stanford. First class 20 students. Annual budget $5 million from my personal inheritance. A board member leaned forward. This is financial suicide. Victoria met his eyes. This is investment in the future. Roger shook his head. Victoria, I understand you're grieving your grandmother, but this isn't grief. Victoria's voice cut like steel. This is purpose. She clicked again. Maya's photo appeared. 16 years old. Test scores, GPA. SAT Math, perfect score. Early acceptance to MIT, Maya Chen. First scholarship recipient. The board members looked impressed despite themselves. Excellent credentials, Roger admitted. But what's her connection to Sterling Industries? Her brother works here. Doing what? Janitorial services? The room went silent. Roger's face darkened. Let me understand. You want to spend $5 million on scholarships starting with the janitor's sister? Yes. This is absurd. Roger stood. The optics alone. The optics are that Sterling Industries invests in merit, not privilege. A board member spoke up. But a janitor. That janitor, Victoria interrupted, is a decorated Navy fighter pilot. She clicked the remote. Marcus's military photo filled the screen. Dress uniform, medals, younger, confident. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, United States Navy, Top Gun graduate. Call sign, steady. 2 combat deployments, Navy Cross nominee, 17 confirmed carrier landings in adverse conditions. The board members leaned forward, reading the displayed credentials. This guy's a legend, someone whispered. Victoria continued, voice steady. He saved my life 3 weeks ago. Flew me through a Category 2 storm when every professional pilot in New York refused. Landed in zero visibility fog in Paris. Got me to my grandmother's bedside with 13 minutes to spare. She paused. Let it sink in. Without him, none of us would be sitting here. Sterling Couture would be owned by charity foundations right now. Roger sat down slowly. Why is he mopping floors? Because, Victoria said quietly, he lost his best friend in a training accident, lost his parents in a house fire, and he's raising his 16-year-old sister alone while trying to save for her education one night shift at a time. The room was silent. Victoria clicked again. A rendering of a beautiful flight school building appeared, the Cameron Hayes Flight Academy, named after his fallen co-pilot. She pulled out a contract, placed it on the table. I'm offering him the position of chief flight instructor, 6-figure salary, full benefits, housing stipend. Roger stared at her. You're serious? Completely. Another board member spoke. What if he refuses? Then I'll find another way. Victoria's voice was firm. But this academy is happening, with or without your approval. Roger leaned back. You've changed. Victoria thought of her grandmother's letter, of Marcus tearing up the check, of Maya's gentle kindness in the hangar. Yes, I have. Roger looked around the table. All in favor? Slowly, hands rose. Not unanimous, but majority. Motion passes. Roger's voice was grudging but respectful. Sterling Aviation Academy is officially launched. Victoria exhaled. Didn't realize she'd been holding her breath. One more thing. She pulled up final slide. We announced this publicly in 3 weeks. Charity Aviation Expo. Press, donors, industry leaders. Maya will speak about the scholarship program. And Marcus? Roger asked. I'm going to ask him to be there. Victoria's voice softened. To accept the position publicly, to see what honoring his friend's memory looks like. If he shows up, he will. Victoria said it with more confidence than she felt. The meeting adjourned. Victoria stood alone in the conference room afterward, staring at Marcus's photo on the screen. She'd just created an entire division, committed $5 million, launched a legacy program, not to ease her guilt, not to impress anyone, but because a man with $247 had shown her what real strength looked like, and she finally understood what her grandmother meant. Don't waste your inheritance, I don't mean the money. Victoria picked up the contract for Marcus, ran her finger over his name, Chief Flight Instructor, the Cameron Hayes Flight Academy. She'd built something that mattered. Now she just had to convince him to accept it. 3 weeks until the expo. 3 weeks to figure out how to give a man back his wings without making it feel like charity. 3 weeks to prove she'd learned the difference between buying someone and believing. 3 weeks later, the Charity Aviation Expo filled Sterling Industries' private airfield with 500 people. Donors in expensive suits, press with cameras, industry leaders, students in scholarship program t-shirts, aircraft on display gleaming under afternoon sun. Victoria stood backstage, adjusting her simple navy dress. Not designer, not flashy, just clean, professional, real. Her assistant poked her head in. Miss Sterling, we're ready for you. Victoria nodded, walked to the wings of the temporary stage, watched as Maya Chen stepped up to the microphone. 16 years old, confident, brilliant, wearing an MIT sweater that Victoria had sent her 2 weeks ago with a note. You earned this. Maya's voice carried across the crowd. 3 weeks ago, I thought my dream was dead. The audience quieted. My brother works 3 jobs trying to save for my education. He never complains. He just works. Every night. Every morning. He gave up everything for me. Maya's voice cracked slightly. Then someone saw us. Really saw us. Not our circumstances. Our potential. She gestured to Victoria in the wings. The crowd applauded. Maya continued. My brother taught me that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about doing what matters, even when you are. Even when you've lost everything. Even when the world tells you you're nobody. Standing ovation. Maya walked off stage, tears in her eyes. Victoria hugged her. You were perfect, Victoria whispered. Maya pulled back. He's here. Victoria's heart jumped. What? In the back. Maya pointed. He came. Victoria scanned the crowd. And there, standing near the hangar entrance in dark slacks and a button-down shirt she'd never seen him wear, was Marcus Chen. Arms crossed. Watching. Uncomfortable, but present. Their eyes met across 500 people. He didn't smile, but he nodded once. Permission. Victoria walked onto the stage. Good afternoon. Her voice was steady. 3 weeks ago I inherited a company, but I also inherited a question from my grandmother. Who do you want to be? The crowd listened. I've spent 27 years being a name, a bank account, a last name that opened doors, but I'd never built anything, never earned anything, never mattered beyond the money. She clicked the remote. The screen behind her lit up. But I'm taking it anyway. Marcus continued. Not for me, for the kids who'll learn here, for Cameron's memory. He looked at Julian. And because someone finally saw past what I lost to what I could still give. That's something you never understood. Value isn't in what you take, it's in what you give. Julian's face reddened. Security escorted him out. The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus turned to Victoria, held out his hand. She shook it. His grip was firm. Real. Equal. I accept. 6 months later, Victoria stood on the rooftop of the flight academy at midnight. Stars overhead, city lights below, cool autumn air, footsteps behind her. You come here a lot? Marcus's voice. She turned. He was in his flight instructor uniform. Just finished an evening class. Reminds me why I built this place. Victoria smiled. Marcus stood beside her, looking at the same stars. I never thanked you. Not really. You thank me every day. Victoria gestured to the building below. Every kid you teach, silence, comfortable, easy. I made you an offer once. Victoria's voice was soft, on a tarmac. Do you remember? Marcus smiled slightly. You said if I flew you to Paris, you'd marry me. I was mocking you, I was cruel, I know. Victoria pulled out a small box, opened it. A simple platinum band, engraved coordinates. These are where you landed us in Paris, the moment everything changed for me. Marcus stared. I'm not asking you to marry me because of a debt. Victoria's voice shook. Or a joke. I'm asking because you're the first person who ever made me want to be better, not richer, not more successful, just better. Marcus took the ring, studied it. On one condition, anything. We do this as equals. No billionaire and janitor, no heiress and pilot. Just two people trying to figure it out. Victoria's tears caught starlight. Deal. Marcus pulled out his own ring. Simple silver band, Chinese characters engraved. It says courage and heart. My mother's ring. My parents gave it to her when they came to this country with nothing. He held it out. I want you to have it. Victoria sobbed. Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes. They exchanged rings under the stars, kissed while the city hummed below. 1 year later, the Cameron Hayes Flight Academy graduated its first class. Marcus stood in a training aircraft cockpit with a nervous 17-year-old student. What if I mess up, sir, then you learn. Marcus's voice was steady. That's what flying teaches you. It's not about never falling, it's about always getting back up. Victoria sat in the co-pilot seat, flight instructor uniform, wedding ring catching the light. She squeezed Marcus's hand. The student took the controls. Hesitant at first, then confident, executed a perfect turn. Marcus and Victoria exchanged proud looks. Below them, Maya stood on the tarmac, home from MIT for summer break. Aerospace engineering major now, building the future. She waved as they flew overhead. The plane climbed into golden afternoon sky. Inside the cockpit, Victoria's voice came through the headset. Remember when you asked where we were going? Marcus smiled. I remember. She looked at him, at the life they'd built, at the kids they were teaching, at the legacy they were creating together. Anywhere, she said, as long as we're flying together. The plane banked into the sun, And for the first time in both their lives, they weren't running from the past. They were flying toward everything they'd built from the wreckage. What would you give up to become who you were meant to be?
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button now.